So, I get to introduce the spirit of Van Jones, my friend, my CNN colleague, who is so multidimensional, multimedia, that he is not actually here with us today. But you feel him, don't you? And you're about to see him on these screens introduce our next award winner, Scott Wallace.
First, let me just give a big shout out to all the honorees, the incredible work that's being done, being recognized tonight. I wish I could be there to celebrate with you. I also want to give a big shout out to the Campaign for America's Future, one of our big leading lights, huge champion over all these years, trying to save the middle class and poor people from the worst of the 1%. When nobody even had those terms, Campaign for America's Future was out there fighting these fights. I can't applaud or salute you enough. But I especially want to give my praise and my admiration to Scott Wallace, who, if we're going to be fair, probably should have gotten this award a year ago. Because a year ago, Scott Wallace had already moved $50 billion with a B from polluters to clean energy, moving money from the pollution to the solution. He should have got the award then. Luckily, we didn't give him the award then, because since then, he hasn't moved 50 billion. He hasn't moved 100 billion. He hasn't moved $1 trillion. He's moved $2.3 trillion in pledges from horrible, nasty, pollution-based fossil fuel industry over to clean and renewable energy. That is an extraordinary achievement by any measure. The next award should be the Nobel Prize as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think, at the same time, anybody is surprised, because that's just the kind of leader that Scott is. Most people in this room know that he's not only the kind of champion that funds smart, he doesn't just put his money on the table. He puts his heart on the table, he puts his brains on the table. He's a great co-strategist, and this is just one of many things that he has done. I am personally heartbroken that I'm not there, because Scott has been with me every step of the way on my career. He has literally funded and supported and helped me strategize on everything that I've done. When I was at the Ella Baker Center, and he funded the Books Not Bars campaign. That campaign closed 5 youth prisons in California, cut the prison population by 80%. When we built Green for All, that campaign has created now 10,000 green jobs across 50 cities. He was one of the first people in the door to help us get that done. He was also the only person smart enough to beg me not to go to the White House. And when I left, he gave me a desk and a phone and a chair in his office, and we figured out what to do going forward. And the crazy thing is that anybody else in this room could probably stand up and tell similar stories about Scott Wallace. Now, the thing about him, he's got it in the blood. His granddad, Henry Wallace, pioneered a lot of what we now call populism. He was the original populist. He comes by it naturally, and he's often kind of shy about it. He doesn't like to grab the microphone. But sometimes you need to hear from somebody who's done as much as he has done. And so I just ask everybody in the room, get on your feet, give a thunderous round of applause to a true champion, a true leader, and a true friend, Scott Wallace. Congratulations, Paul.
Thanks, Van. You can hear me in LA. It's true, Christy and I did try to talk Van out of taking the White House job because he's so incredibly valuable out here building movements. I guess Glenn Beck agreed with us. Thanks, Glenn. I want to second Van's immense thanks to the awesome Campaign for America's Future, the backbone of the progressive movement. I know they're not quite done taking back America, but they've done enough that the Neanderthals, that's Maureen Dowd's words, have now appropriated the phrase as their vision of America slips away. And let me add a huge shout out to our executive director, Ellen Dorsey, and our brilliant staff at the Wallace Global Fund. Their devotion and their hard work makes all the difference in the world. But in truth, I need to accept this honor on behalf of my dear old grandpa. We're just following his instruction manual. He endowed our foundation more than half a century ago, and his vision animates us every single day. In 1942, as vice president in the midst of World War II, he gave his most famous speech. In large part, it was a reaction to an exhortation by Life magazine publisher Henry Luce that the century that came after the war should be called the American century. The whole notion of American exceptionalism and how America must rule the world. Well, Henry Wallace called him stupid. Not in so many words. He said, "There can be no privileged peoples. We are no more a master race." To Henry Luce, one of the leading lights of the right wing, we are no more a master race than the Nazis. Total smackdown. He said the new century must be the century of the common man. Common person, he probably meant. Not just in America, but all over the world. We need a people's revolution, he said, for all the people, not just for the self-interest of a few, with an economy that is, quote, just, charitable, and enduring. The speech lit a fire. It became a best-selling book. It's a very thin one. They made a music video with stirring music and images of revolutions and people on the march. It inspired Aaron Copland to write his most famous composition, Fanfare for the Common Man. The damn speech went viral without the internet. The New York Times asked him to write about what the common man was up against. His answer, American fascism, defined as huge corporations getting too close to government and putting money ahead of human beings, and using the media to spread propaganda that serves their own interests and turns people against each other. American fascists, quote, fear competition and distrust democracy because it stands for equal opportunity. They demand free enterprise, but are the spokesman for monopoly and vested interest. Their ultimate goal, he said, is to use the power of the state and the power of the market simultaneously to keep the common man in eternal subjection. This is 3/4 of a century ago. There's still a grain of truth to it. Now, all foundations know that making sense is important. We need facts, science, statistics, studies, policy solutions, good arguments. Being right is great, but it's not enough. To get real change, it takes a movement. The fossil fuel industry that's cooking the planet and denying it isn't going to suddenly reverse itself. The gun industry isn't going to suddenly release its harem of captive politicians all by itself. The Voting Rights Act didn't enact itself 50 years ago, and it's not going to restore itself today. The prison industrial complex is not going to shrink itself. The death penalty isn't going to kill itself. Citizens United isn't going to overturn itself. Income inequality is not going to fix itself. It takes a movement. And movements take great leaders. From Desmond Tutu to Van Jones, from Bill McKibben to Reverend Barber and Elizabeth Warren, and so on. And movements take money, and a strategy, and a whole lot of people. So for us to see the Divest Invest movement take off the way it has, sparking the passion of college students fed up with our generation ruining their planet, reforming university endowments, foundations, faith institutions, cities, states, huge pension funds, and the sovereign wealth funds of entire nations, rekindling the great passion of apartheid divestment while making both moral and financial sense. Well, that's a people's revolution. It's the power of the common man, and it's the only way to change the world. Thank you very much.